Thanks War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Cross-section B-17 Flying Fortress. Origins: the B-17 began development far before the outbreak of hostility. In the 1930s, the Army Air Corps was in need of a large four-engine bomber, one that could be called to America's defense if an enemy fleet was to invade from a distant corner such as Hawaii, Alaska, or Panama. To this end, the aircraft company Boeing created the first prototype as early as 1935. In 1937, there was a limited production run. So by the time the U.S. entered the conflict in 1941, there was already a small but growing fleet of the aircraft. The name Flying Fortress came from a reporter who in 1935 exclaimed that the prototype looked like a flying fortress after seeing the multiple machine guns on the craft. Variants and numbers over the years, the basic design of the B-17 was upgraded multiple times. After the Model 299, the first prototype, the first to go into significant production was the B-17B, which first flew in 1939. During the war, the Flying Fortress was modified multiple times, with improvements such as more defensive guns, more powerful engines, and many other features to improve performance. The B-17 is considered to be the definitive variant of the Flying Fortress, with over 8,600 manufactured before production ended. Altogether, around 12,700 of all variants were made, mostly by Boeing, but also by manufacturers Douglas Aircraft and Vega, which was a subsidiary of Lockheed. In addition to its role as a bomber, there were several other patterns that were devised using the B-17's frame. These included an escort version, the YB-40, which was armed with extra machine guns and was intended to escort other B-17s before the introduction of long-range fighter aircraft, the C-108, a cargo plane, the F-9 reconnaissance aircraft, among them. The F-9 reconnaissance aircraft. Many others. Dimensions: the B-17 measured in at 74 feet 9 inches in length, with a wingspan of just under 104 feet and a height of 19 feet 1 inch. It weighed in at 36,000 pounds unloaded, though this can increase to upwards of 65,000 pounds, with a full bomb load, machine guns, ammunition, and other additions. The Flying Fortress was made from aluminum, which was much lighter than steel, saving on valuable weight. Arsenal: dive into the action by clicking the link in the description below and discover why War Thunder is unmatched in a genre. Performance: the B-17 was propelled by four Wright Cyclone R-1829 cylinder engines, each one capable of producing 1,200 horsepower. The top speed of the Flying Fortress was 300 miles per hour, though this was rarely done, with typical cruising speed of around 170 to 200 miles per hour. The surface ceiling was 35,000 feet. The B-17 was a long-range bomber and had a large 2,800-gallon fuel tank, giving the Fortress a range of around 2,000 miles, though this can vary greatly depending on the bomb load, weather conditions, and numerous other factors. Armament: as a bomber, the B-17 had a typical payload of 6,000 pounds of bombs, though this can be increased to 8,000 pounds depending on the type of ordnance being carried. In some cases, external bomb racks were fitted to the fuselage, increasing the payload to over 17,000 pounds, though this greatly reduced the operational range and was rarely performed. To protect the bomber, the B-17 was fitted with 12 50 caliber machine guns, fitted around the fuselage. These were a machine gun mounted each on the left and right side of the nose. In the cheek of the bomber, a pair of remote-controlled guns in a chin turret, twin guns in a dorsal turret, a pair of waist gunners with a single machine gun each, a pair of waist gunners in the ball turret underneath the fuselage, and a pair utilized by the tail gunner, An additional 13th gun could also be located in an auxiliary turret behind a dorsal turret. Since space and weight were limited, each gun had a small supply of ammunition, with no more than a minute's worth of rounds available, forcing the gunners to be careful with their aim. Crew with a crew of 10 men. These were the pilot, co-pilot, bombardier, who operated the chin turret, the navigator, who utilized the cheek guns, engineer, who was also responsible for the dorsal turret, a radio operator, a pair of waist gunners, a tail gunner, and a ball turret gunner, arguably the worst position on the aircraft. Because the flying fortress was unpressurized, the crew would need to rely on external oxygen supplies, or they would pass out from lack of oxygen. To protect them from the frigid temperatures at high altitudes, they would wear wool-lined clothes and jackets, which would be heated through an internal electric heating system. Since any exposed skin would be vulnerable to frostbite, they communicated with one another through an intercom system, the Norden bomb site. In order for the bombing missions of the B-17 to be effective, it needed to be able to deliver its payload accurately from high altitudes. For this reason, the flying fortress would be equipped with the Norden bomb sight. First going into production in 1932, it replaced the Sperry 1 bomb sight. There were different versions of the bomb sight, but they all operated on the same basic principle. As the bomber approached its target, the bombardier, located in the nose of the aircraft, would activate the bomb sight. He would input the aircraft's heading, speed, and estimates of wind speed and direction into the sight's analog computer, and then align the crosshairs on the target. At this point, he was in control of the aircraft. Gyro stabilizers would keep the bomber level, and the sight had an integrated bomb release mechanism, which allowed the bombardier to drop the payload the instant they were over the target, since even a few seconds delay could mean missing the target entirely. Once the bombs were dropped, the Norden bomb sight would be shut off, and the pilot would take over flying the aircraft once more. During this time, the bomber was the most vulnerable, since it had to stay steady and level, making it an easy target for fires and flak guns. In spite of some admirers of the Norden sight stating that it could, quote, drop a bomb in a pickle barrel, the realities of bombing runs during the chaos of combat meant that very few bombs hit their target, and large formations of bombers were necessary to ensure the destruction of the objective. Names and artwork like virtually all aircraft of the Second World War. Crews became sentimental about their aircraft and would give them names and decorate the nose with artwork. These could range from the humorous to the risque to the sentimental. Animals, cartoon characters, pin-up models, and various other images adorned flying fortresses, adding a personal touch and a bit of levity and sentimentality to an otherwise distressing situation. The B-17 in combat. The B-17 served in virtually every theater of the conflict where the U.S. Army Air Corps was present, and was generally a well-regarded aircraft by those who served in them. In spite of its reliability and high performance, bombing missions, especially over German-occupied Europe, were particularly dangerous. B-17s would fly in what were called box formations, groupings of 9 to 12 bombers in close formation whose machine guns could cover one another. In spite of this, early in the war they operated outside of the limited range of fighter escorts, and once the escorts returned home, they would be swarmed by Luftwaffe fighters. In the face of fierce resistance, the B-17 gained a reputation as a robust aircraft that could endure significant punishment. Tales of bombers flying with tails blown off, damaged engines, or gaping holes ripped in the fuselage were commonplace, and these heavily damaged aircraft could still limp home. In spite of this, B-17 crews suffered appalling casualty rates during the course of the war. Of the 12,700 bombers built, over 4,700 of them were lost, roughly a 37% rate. In 1943, the life expectancy for a flying fortress and its crew was around 11 missions, well short of the 25 needed to complete a tour. In spite of these rates, the bombing missions took their toll on German industry, grinding their war machine to a standstill. The lessons learned during these missions gave rise to the B-29 Superfortress, which rendered the B-17 obsolete. After the war was over, surviving B-17s were still used into the 1950s for reconnaissance, training, and as a cargo plane. Of the thousands that were produced, only a few dozen flying fortresses remain intact, mostly as museum pieces, and only a handful are airworthy, and these have been grounded due to safety concerns, ending the career of one of the most famous aircraft ever to take to the skies. A huge thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video. Dive into the action and play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox by clicking the link in the description below. If you're new or haven't played in the last 6 months, you're in for a treat with a massive bonus pack that includes premium vehicles and other awesome stuff, available on all platforms. Hurry up though, this special offer won't last forever.